Translocation by R.E. Thoresen. An overlooked aspect of medicine, life and spirituality, and an important tool when entering the spiritual world. Why this book? I'm writing this book out of the needs I see at the present time. I see the demons of modern electricity hovering all over, changing our very sense organs. I see the grid of past karma penetrating the entire earth, making people sick. I see hypersensitive people being robbed of their spiritual possibilities by the devastating electromagnetic radiation. I see diseases being translocated to others, humans or animals, despite of the good intentions of many therapists or doctors. I see many friends craving for spirituality, though stuck in the material world. Three abilities are needed to be able to do something with these problems in the energetic spiritual world. 1. The ability to consciously cross the threshold. 2. The ability to open one or more of our spiritual sense organs. 3. The ability to act upon the spiritual phenomena we see or encounter in the spiritual world, either as seekers or therapists, to transform what we meet. With a deep understanding of how to pass the threshold, how to open and use our spiritual senses, and how to transform or translocate the often negative spiritual aspects we meet in modern society, we can make a change. To try to investigate these possibilities and to give my fellow travellers in spirit the insights, tools and abilities to do such a change is my intentions of writing this book. Introduction. The universality of the phenomenon of transformation and translocation. The implications of transformation and translocation within clairvoyance, human medicine, veterinary medicine. In our physical world, I have a strong impression that most of our work and what we do is changing or moving things around. It seems sometimes that our whole life is about translocating things from A to B, repairing or changing, growing food, eating food, discharging it, and finally rebuilding it and transforming it through compost. But it can also be translocated through the wastewater and the sewers, ending up in hurting life. And as here below, so above. In the spiritual world, everything is in motion and transition, and is in continuous development. According to Rudolf Steiner in his Light course, GA 320, even time and space are based on movement. Also, nothing repeats itself. A specific experience can never be experienced twice. All development in the spirit is based on movement, transition, change, transformation, and translocation. In obtaining clairvoyance, we have also to move in the spiritual world and translocate something or make some change in the established order of our soul properties, our spiritual makeup. To treat a patient, we have to change something, make something move. We have to transform or to translocate. Quite early in my career as a veterinarian, I made some astonishing observations. These observations were based on the foundation of finding the true cause of the disease and not by focusing on the symptoms. To do this, I had to learn methods to develop a more sensitive, energetic observation of the body than usually are used within ordinary veterinary or human medicine. For the most part I used, and still use, pulse diagnosis, but also incorporated a certain clairvoyance and general special sensitivity. My observations were described in 8 points. 1. In treating animals, I found that the deeper cause of the disease almost always was the same as the deeper cause in the owner. 2. In treating humans, I found that the deeper cause of the symptoms usually was the same in the children as in the dominating parent. 3. In treating humans, I found that the deeper cause of the symptoms often was the same as in the spouse, especially if the spouse was the dominating partner. 4. I found that in treating the alpha human, the origin of the deeper cause of the disease, in a transformative way, a healing process was induced in the whole family and farm animals. 5. I found that the use of 5 elemental thinking furthers translocation of the deeper cause, while using systems based on 7 or 12 element thinking furthers a transformation. A 6 element thinking furthers a suppression of the symptoms. Notes. Most of the acupuncture philosophy and practice is based on the 5 element theory and the conception of yin and yang. And as I have often used acupuncture in my treatment, I had the ability to observe these connections. The so-called 5 elements can be ordered differently and arranged according to the 7 planets and also to the 12 zodiacal signs. This view will as such then correlate more with anthroposophy than Chinese philosophy and thinking. As the 5 element thinking of the Chinese can be transformed or adjusted to both a 7 element and a 12 element thinking, it can also be adopted to a 6 element thinking. A. 5 elemental thinking is a representative for the Eastern way of thinking, Chinese thinking, Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism. B. 6 elemental thinking is a representative for the Middle East way of thinking, Islamic, Jewish. C. 7 or 12 element thinking is a representative for the European Western way of thinking, Christian, anthroposophical. 6. When I regularly monitored the health of animals, especially horses, and they were sold to another person, the deepest cause of their symptoms changed from being like the old alpha owner to be like the new alpha owner as soon as the animal accepted the new owner as his alpha master. Also, when a young woman who was living with her dominant mother and thus showed the same deficiency as the mother married a dominant man, she changed the deeper cause in 3 years. 7. The described deeper cause of the disease showed different symptoms in relation to where in the body this deeper cause found its expression. A kidney weakness in the human remained a kidney weakness in the animal, but it expressed itself very differently depending on where in the body it, the kidney weakness, found a home, found a hold. For example, symptoms that may arise from a poor blood circulation, the deficient process, are very variable. Symptoms differ according to the time of the year, the age and the species or breed of the animal or human patient. Poor blood circulation, in acupuncture called TH, triple heater, manifests differently with different species, genders and ages. For example, children. Poor blood circulation manifests as otitis media. Young girls and boys manifests as eczema. Puberty girls, menstrual problems, painful. Puberty boys, acne. Older women, menopausal women, expressed as heat syndromes, internal heat after menstruation, hot flushes, vasomotor disorders. Grown-up men expressed itself in back pain. In puppies, there were red skin infections around the nose. In young dogs, furnioculosis, skin infections of the paws. Trotters, fetlock or navicular disorders, especially on the right forelimb. Cows, mastitis. 8. I found that if there were no homes or holding places in the beta human or child or animal, the cause of the transferred disease, the weakness, was not allowed to come to expression but remained dormant, subclinical. As we will see later in this book, and as it is described in several of my other books, for example Demons and Healing and Experiences from the Threshold, is that diseases are expressions of spiritual beings, distorted, changed elemental beings or demons, pathological elemental beings. These beings are able to travel from a human being to an animal, between humans and also between animals. In treatment, the easiest way to heal a person is merely just to translocate the problem, the demon. It is more difficult to transform the demon. That is why several schools, especially in China, have this knowledge and try to translocate the demons into plants or semi-precious stones. Most European schools of acupuncture also have this knowledge, but are not consciously aware of it, as they actually teach their students how to avoid a translocation to themselves, but do not consider that the disease can translocate to others. With this understanding and insight, I will summarize the most important concepts that will be the foundation of all the further understandings in this book. All physical phenomena and beings have a spiritual foundation, a spiritual reality. In the spiritual world, all entities or part of an entity can translocate and transform both the beneficial and the adversary ones. When a beneficial entity or part translocate or transform, our level of consciousness is changed. When a malignant or adversarial entity or part of this entity translocate or transform in a negative way, disease is created, aggravated, or translocated. All diseases or symptoms in both humans, animals and plants are physical expressions of the presence of non-beneficial spiritual entities. These spiritual non-beneficial entities might be toxic plant spirits, bacterial spirits, viral spirits, old karmic spirits, or other forms of demonic spirits. All such pathological spirits seek a home or living place in the body, an empty or weak void to slip into. All adversarial spirits are of three different kinds, sometimes operating on their own, sometimes operating together, as in Cancer, as we later will see. The three kinds are Aramanic spirits, Luciferic spirits, Azuric spirits. All the different symptoms in both humans and animals come from one of these three spiritual demons entering through one of the 12 sense openings and taking possession of one of 12 possible voids, the 12 main organs, in the body. The demons may enter via the 12 different sensory organs of the body, each belonging to one zodiacal energy stream. These 36 different possibilities can give rise to 1,000 symptoms in the different species and different individual humans. All these different symptoms can be treated by treating the fundamental cause, the original demon, usually coming from the dominant alpha human. All internal diseases in animals come from humans. In treatment or therapy, all diseases can either be translocated or transformed, not the symptoms, but the causative demon. To understand the mechanism of such translocation, we need to understand the following: the development and spiritual construction of the entire cosmos, the development and spiritual construction of man, the development and spiritual construction of animals, the reality and substance of the translocated disease. To be able to diagnose the diseases spiritually, we have to enter the spiritual world through our feeling and also develop some kind of monitoring of these pathological entities, as for example through the use of pulse diagnosis. To be able to treat the diseases spiritually, we have to enter the spiritual world through our willing and also develop some kind of method to influence these pathological entities inside the patient's body, for example through herbs, acupuncture, homeopathy or osteopathy. The effect of both diagnosis and treatment is highly dependent on the insights and knowledge of the therapist. Christ is the main and fundamental transforming force. In all these explanations, I will describe the spiritual foundation as given by Rudolf Steiner, and also in certain aspects by Edgar Cayce and Peter Deunov. Deunov. Rudolf Steiner on the concept of shared diseases. Using the words of the Gospel according to Luke, on September the 24th, 1909, Rudolf Steiner lectured on the importance of the concept of shared demonic pathology among all beings and its treatment with Christ consciousness. Quote, "At the time of Christ's appearance on the earth, there were many human beings in his environment in whom sins and transgressions, especially defects of character deriving from former bad traits, were expressing themselves in disease. The sin that is actually seated in the astral body and manifests as illness is called possession in the Gospel of St. Luke. It is the condition that sets in when a man attracts alien spirits into his astral body, and when his better qualities fail to give him mastery over his whole nature. In human beings in whom the old state of separation between the etheric and physical bodies still persisted, the effects of evil qualities and attributes expressed themselves conspicuously at that time in forms of illness manifesting as possession. The Gospel of St. Luke tells how such people were healed through the mere proximity and the words of the individuality of Christ Jesus, and how the evil power working in them was expelled. This is a prefigurement of conditions at the end of Earth evolution, when man's good qualities will exercise a healing influence upon all his other traits." End quote. The above excerpt describes possession in those that suffer from the vestiges of their misdeeds, and their cure through the mere words or presence of Christ. Quote, "When Christ speaks of deeper sin, sin which reaches into the etheric body, he uses a particular expression, clearly indicating that the spiritual factor causing the illness must first be removed. He does not immediately say to a paralyzed man, 'Stand up and walk,' but concerns himself with the cause that is penetrating as illness into the etheric body, and says, 'Thy sins are forgiven thee,' meaning that the sin which had eaten its way right into the etheric body must first be expelled." End quote. The above demonstrates that the cause of diseases begins at the spiritual level with sin. With the concept of sin, I do not refer to sinning as meant in our modern world or society, but the actions that lead to hurting one's own or others' eye consciousness, astral, etheric, or physical body. Quote, "In outer life itself, the effect made by one astral body upon another is quite obvious. You can, for example, wound a man by a word charged with hatred. Something then takes place in his astral body. He hears the word and suffers pain in his astral body. That is an example of mutual action between one astral body and another. Mutual action between one etheric body and another is far more deeply hidden. This involves delicate influences, which play from man to man, but are never perceived today. The most deeply hidden of all are the influences which reach the physical body, because owing to its dense materiality, it conceals the working of the spiritual almost completely." End quote. The above paragraph explains the effects of emotions on one astral body to another, and more sinister influences that are spread from one etheric body to another that can reach to the physical. Quote, "Christ Jesus shows that he is able to see into the very depths of the physical corporality and to work into it. When it is a matter of working spiritually, man cannot be regarded as being enclosed in his skin. It has often been said that our finger is wiser than we are ourselves. Our finger knows that the blood can flow through it only if the blood is circulating normally through the whole body. Our finger knows that it would wither away if it were severed from the rest of the organism. So too, if he would understand the conditions relating to the physical body, man must know that in respect of his physical organism, he belongs to humanity as a whole, that influences are continually passing from one human being to another, and that he can in no way separate his physical health as an individual from the health of the whole of humanity." End quote. The The passage above clearly relates to the fact that we all are deeply interconnected with one another, and that we translocate disease to each other. Quote, "There came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of the synagogue, and he fell down at Jesus' feet, and besought him that he would come into his house. For he had only one daughter, about 12 years of age, and she lay dying. But as he went, the people thronged him. And a woman having an issue of blood 12 years, which had spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any, came behind him, and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood stanched. How can the 12-year-old daughter of Jairus possibly be healed, for she is at the very point of death? This can only be understood if we know that the girl's physical illness was connected with another phenomenon in another person, and that she could not be healed independently of that other phenomenon. When this child, now 12 years old, was born, a certain connection existed with another personality, a connection deeply grounded in karma. Hence we are told that a woman who had suffered from a certain illness for 12 years passed behind Christ and touched the border of his garment. Why is this woman mentioned here? It is because she was connected karmically with Jairus' child. This 12-year-old girl and the woman who had suffered for 12 years were deeply connected. And it is not without reason that a secret number is indicated here. The woman with an illness suffered for 12 years approaches Jesus and is healed, and only now could he enter the house of Jairus and heal the 12-year-old girl who was believed to be already dead." End quote. This important chapter demonstrates Steiner's explanation of karma's important role among us, and how Christ can work through the higher I to heal us from the ego, astral, etheric, and physical body. Quote, "Your ego, in the present stage of its development, is still weak. As yet it has little mastery, but it will gradually become master of the astral body, the etheric body, and the physical body, and will transform them. The great ideal of Christ, who reveals to mankind what this mastery can mean. It is upon truths such as these that the Gospels are founded, truths which could be recorded only by those who did not rely upon outer documents, but upon the testimony of men who were seers and servants of the Word. Conviction of what lies behind the Gospels can be acquired only by degrees, but men will gradually grasp with such intensity and strength the nature of the truths upon which the Scriptures are founded that this understanding will have an effect upon all the members of humanity." End quote. Rudolf Steiner states that although now our higher I, our connection to the cosmos as a singular divinity, is only in its rudimentary stage, it will someday develop and flourish, at which time we will join Christ as a spiritual unity. Rudolf Joseph Lorenz Steiner, the 25th of February 1861 to the 30th of March 1925, was an Austrian philosopher, author, social reformer, architect, and esotericist. He gained initial recognition at the end of the 19th century as a literary critic and published philosophical works including The Philosophy of Freedom. At the beginning of the 20th century he founded an esoteric spiritual movement, Anthroposophy, with roots in German idealist philosophy and theosophy. Other influences included Goethean science and Rosicrucianism. In the first, more philosophically orientated phase of this movement, Steiner attempted to find a synthesis between science and spirituality. His philosophical work from these years, which he termed spiritual science, sought to apply the clarity of thinking characteristic of Western philosophy to spiritual questions, differentiating this approach from what he considered to be vague approaches to mysticism. In the second phase, beginning around 1907, he began working collaboratively in a variety of artistic media, including drama, the movement arts, developing a new artistic form, eurythmy, and architecture, culminating in the building of the Goetheanum, a cultural centre to house all the activities of anthroposophy. In the third phase of his work, beginning after World War I, he worked to establish various practical endeavours, including Waldorf education, biodynamic agriculture, and anthroposophical medicine. Steiner advocated a form of ethical individualism, to which he later brought a more explicitly spiritual approach. He based his epistemology on Goethe's worldview, in which, quote, thinking is no more and no less an organ of perception than the eye or ear. Just as the eye perceives colours and the ear sounds, so thinking perceives ideas, end quote. A consistent thread that runs from his earliest philosophical phase through his later spiritual orientation is the goal of demonstrating that there are no essential limits to human knowledge. In 1899, Steiner experienced what he described as a life-transforming inner encounter with the being of Christ. Previously, he had little or no relation to Christianity in any form. Then and thereafter, his relationship to Christianity remained entirely founded upon personal experience, and was thus both non-denominational and strikingly different from conventional religious forms. Steiner was then 38 years of age, and the experience of meeting the Christ occurred after a tremendous inner struggle. To use his own words, the, quote, experience culminated in my standing in the spiritual presence of the mystery of Golgotha in a most profound and solemn festival of knowledge, end quote. For staying strong in the face of Hitler and his Nazi directives, the Bulgarians credit one man, Christian mystic Peter Deunov. In a quote attributed to Albert Einstein, quote, the whole world bows down before me. I bow down before the master Peter Deunov, end quote. Peter Deunov, the master, with the occult name Bensar Deunov, the 11th of July 1864 to the 27th of December 1944, was a spiritual master and founder of a school of esoteric Christianity called the Universal White Brotherhood. The various components in the teachings of Master Bensar Deunov are set out and designed in his approximately 7,000 lectures given in the interval of 1900 to 1944. They were released in several series: lectures before the general class, generals before the special class, Sunday lectures, annual meeting lectures, morning lectures, etc. He started with 3 followers, and these progressively grew to many thousands. The major types in teaching of Bensar Deunov, Peter Deunov, are summarized in the pentagram: love, wisdom, truth, justice, and virtue, recognized as characteristics of the historical cosmic and mystic Christ. Love is a main macrocosmic and microcosmic type, performing in the various factors of people everyday living as aspiration in the emotional area of the heart, feeling in the soul, power in the area of the eye or the mind, and principle in the spirit. The major techniques for spiritual work in the school of the Universal White Brotherhood are prayer meetings, musical and breathing workouts, reading the word of Master Bensar Deunov, Peter Deunov, greeting the sunrise, trips in the mountains, life in brotherhood camps, annual events, etc. The special techniques are the testimony of the color rays of light and pan-eurythmy. The so-called Great Universal White Brotherhood is the essential cosmogonist perspective. It is described as a living thing made up of advanced human souls, lodges of the great initiates and their disciples, and the 9 hierarchies of supersensitive creatures, angels, archangels, principalities, powers, mights, dominions, thrones, cherubim, and seraphim. According to Master Bensar Deunov, Christ is the superior governor of the great universal brotherhood. The Master Bensar Deunov was also a musician who composed spiritual music and more than 150 songs. He presented pan-eurythmy, the universal harmony of movement. These sacred actions, which are set to music, were and still are performed every morning from March the 22nd to September by all his followers. Edgar Cayce, 1877 to 1945, has been called the sleeping prophet, the father of holistic medicine, and the most documented psychic of the 20th century. For more than 40 years of his adult life, Cayce gave psychic readings to thousands of seekers while in an unconscious state, diagnosing illnesses and revealing lives lived in the past and prophecies yet to come. But who exactly was Edgar Cayce? Cayce was born on a farm in Hopkinsville, Kentucky in 1877, and his psychic abilities began to appear as early as his childhood. He was able to see and talk to his late grandfather's spirit, and often played with imaginary friends whom he said were spirits on the other side. He also displayed an uncanny ability to memorize the pages of a book simply by sleeping on it. These gifts labelled the young Cayce as strange, but all Cayce really wanted was to help others, especially children. Later in life, Cayce would find that he had the ability to put himself into a sleep-like state by lying down on a couch, closing his eyes and folding his hands over his stomach. In this state of relaxation and meditation, he was able to place his mind in contact with all time and space. The universal consciousness, also known as the superconscious mind. From there he could respond to questions as broad as, "What are the secrets of the universe?" and "What is my purpose in life?" to as specific as, "What can I do to help my arthritis?" and "How were the pyramids of Egypt built?" His responses to these questions came to be called readings, and their insights offer practical help and advice to individuals even today. Many people are surprised to learn that Edgar Cayce was a devoted churchgoer and Sunday school teacher. At a young age, Cayce vowed to read the Bible for every year of his life, and at the time of his death in 1945, he had accomplished this task.